it's basically like I'm going up to the OG and saying, "Hey, yo, I'm new in this neighborhood. What should I be expecting as far as this backlash? I know
Mm.
there will probably be no like you got legislation. Your name is in legislation and uh, whole political movements. But the first question is, so I remember when, in 2018, when they said, well, the New York Times is going to do this project. And so, just me hearing about it is nothing like you being involved in it. Could you have anticipated like the backlash that you would receive? Because, you think, well, people are going to be mad at this. So you kind of anticipate it because being in a black public, being black in a public facing position, you just get that naturally, no matter what you do. But could you have anticipated the furor of the backlash in which you see?
Hell no. Uh, I mean, so one, as soon as they see that drawing of the little girl with the flag burning in the background of your book, you just wait wait for that. I love the image, but yeah. So no, as you said, being a Black journalist who writes about race, racism, Black things, you always know basically anything that you write is going to get a backlash response. And I certainly anticipated a conservative backlash to the 1619 project because, frankly, if I wasn't upsetting conservatives with this work, the work would not have succeeded because I'm trying to trouble the entire narrative of America as a free, exceptional nation. But even knowing that, this has been really unbelievable, right? Like to not just have the kind of normal conservative outrage, but like you said, legislation, there's federal legislation, there's state legislation, there's school board policy, to have the president of the United States at the time constantly condemning your work and creating an entire counter commission called the 1776 Commission, to have the Secretary of State, instead of being out in the world representing American interests, like condemning 1619 and saying we're not a multicultural nation. Like, it's been really insane, and in an odd way, extremely gratifying, right? Like to
Yeah,
to produce this work of journalism that has these powerful white men so pressed. It's gratifying because I know that we both got into journalism not to comfort the powerful, and to tell stories that for too long the people who controlled our industry, the people who control kind of our national narrative and memory, have tried to bury this history. And so you have to mark that as a sign of its ultimate success and power, that there's been this type of pushback. But there were some scary times in the last couple of years.
so what you just said is interesting to me because I know amongst like black journalists, black writers in general, we know that like the backlash is a sign of success. Like if we're being honest, making people you're not doing it right, probably if you're not making white people mad. Like if a bunch of white people aren't mad, you're probably not speaking truth as raw as it needs to be spoken. But the inverse of that, right, is that if if everyone would have accepted it and said, "Oh, this is a great project," do you think it would have like you would have felt this level of satisfaction if it was just like heralded in the same way, but without the backlash? Do you think that you would have felt the same level of satisfaction?
I certainly think Republicans have sold a lot of my books, right? Like when I first pitched the project, I had this, what I consider to be a super ridiculous goal, which was I'm like, I want people to know, like regular people to know the date 1619. And that seems silly that, like, you could produce a work of journalism and somehow force 1619 into the national lexicon, but it's happened. Like even when Donald Trump is tweeting against the 1619 Project, now all, of his followers know the date 1619 and that slavery, that African people were here in 1619. So I, yes, if this would have been a project that came into the world and everyone loved it, it would have meant it was a safe project. It would have meant it was a project that, in many ways, just reaffirmed the narratives that we've always known. So honestly, Michael, I judge this project's success in two ways. Um, yes, I want lots of white people to read the project. Obviously, they need this information. They need to be able to understand the actual country that we live in, not the mythological country we've all been taught about. But if white people loved it and Black people didn't, I also would have considered that a failure, right? So I look at my audiences. I look at like who comes out to hear me talk, who stops me and thanks me for the work. And I have, very mixed audiences, but it's always Black folks. It's always a Black audience. And so that success to me both came from that I created something that did provide comfort to Black folks, right? Did tell Black people, you're not paranoid, you're not crazy. Everything you thought about the country is true, but here's the data that you didn't have, and simultaneously making, I would say, the right white people angry about that same thing.
Yeah, I think I've never thought about it, what you just said about, because the date 1619 wasn't a widely known thing before that project. But to me, one of the hallmarks of your book and how I like judge success is I remember when it came out and people, but especially like older Black women were saying, I gotta get one of these for my children, not for me, but I'm buying this for the next generation. Like I gotta get this for my little niece or my little granddaughter. And I think that goes to like your part of now the history of what we teach and give to the next generation, not to just the people who are around now, but this is the thing that will be on. I talk about in my book about the middle room and how I discovered the voice and Lerone Bennett Jr.
Yes.
And this book is that next generation that in that next generation's library of the thinkers who taught us and preserved our culture. I think that is important. One of the things that's interesting to me though is having all this conversation we just had. No one, I still can't really. I've never heard an adequate explanation of what the consternation is for. Like, so being at your most benevolent, like at your most objective, what have you heard? Like, so it made you think, oh, that's a good reason why people don't like. Like, have you heard a good reason why there is so much that?
Yes. So yes. So let me say, I think that there's obviously legitimate critique of the 1619 project. Like you can't produce to me anything that's perfect, anything that's above critique. And when you want to produce something really ambitious and big, that's going to invite critique. And um, I think me not being as precise when writing about the role of slavery and the American Revolution opened the door, right? It provided, there was some legitimate critique of how I wrote that, and also kind of like just dropping that bomb in there about slavery being a motivation for some of the colonists, but not showing my work and not showing where I got that from, really allowed then a small group of historians to try to use that to discredit the entire project. And if you have a bunch of people who don't have legitimate critique, but really just want to try to discredit the project, I gave them some raw meat unintentionally, and I've
But
regretted that. So
but
I,
let me ask you though.
yeah,
So that critique though, specifically that critique,
yes,
is not a critique that like appeared out of nowhere in the 1619 project. If you read, Joe Horn. For instance, wrote a whole book about it. If you read
Yes.
a lot of historians, both black and white, who were legitimate historians, you've heard that. Like all from the, they were gonna the British queen was half part black and she was down with freeing the slaves and that was consternation. Like everyone, like if you're a legitimate historian, it's not a idea that you've heard, right? Like
No.
even if you don't disagree with it, right?
No, I
And
mean, look, I
yeah,
didn't sit down one day and say, let me make up some shit about the American Revolution and publish it in the New York Times, right? Like, I got that. Gerald Horne, Alan Taylor. I mean, it, and so if you go to the book version versus, so that critique is not of the book version, that critique is
yeah,
of the original project. I have, I read probably 6 to 7 more books on that period after the project published, and then showed my work. I actually expanded the American Revolutionary part of my essay from being a couple paragraphs to pages and pages, where I show and cite all of the work to back it up. So no, I don't think it was legitimate in that people were saying, oh, that's just not true. Slavery didn't play any role. I don't think it's legitimate in that it was wrong. I think the critique was legitimate in that I should have just offered more evidence and been more careful with my language. And so for bad faith folks, somebody like Sean Willans from Princeton, who used that to then try to credential me because he has a different vision of America that I would say is also not based in reality. I just gave them that fodder. But most of the people who critique and criticize, I wouldn't even say critique because it's not actual critique, who criticize and try to discredit the project, just don't like that the project exists and makes the arguments that we make. They, as you know, most of the project is not written by me. It is written by academic historians. They never talk about those other essays. They talk about 2 essays, my essay on democracy and Matt Desmond's essay on capitalism. And that is not for no reason, right? That those are the 2 that most centrally go at and try to dispel the mythology of America, which is that we're the greatest, freest country the world has ever known, and capitalism is the most liberatory economic system the world has ever known. But they're not critiquing the entire project, and most people they haven't even read my whole essay. That's clear. I can tell that they haven't read the essay, and they certainly haven't read the project. So it's really just the 1619 project as a symbolic thing, right? As a symbolic thing that's saying, we didn't start in 1776. We started with slavery, and slavery is more important than the practice of slavery is more important than these ideas of liberty. And all these white men that you want to give credit for building everything in this country, actually, we did that. It's the very idea of that, and that it appeared, no disrespect to the root or the griot, but these are Black publications. And I am convinced, had you done the 1619 project for a Black publication, it would not get the type of heat that it's gotten because it happened at the New York Times. And so that, I think, offended people more than anything, that you could publish something like this, making these arguments in the New York Times. And so I've seen very little, I've seen some legitimate critique, but that is not what any of us are talking about, right? That's not what's getting it banned. That's not what's getting it targeted. No one's talking about the actual legitimate critique. Some of it, which actually came from the left, right? That said, it's too nationalistic, that it kind of reifies ideas of nationalism and patriotism. And I actually think some of that critique is legitimate, but no one's talking about any of that. They're only talking about the effort to say this project got its facts wrong, and so it can't be trusted. And that's
so
not true.
let me. So this goes into my next question. Do you think it is possible for a black led a book by black people for black people to tell the truth? Let's not even call it the truth. To tell detailed history of America from black people's perspective, and it be accepted by the vast majority of Americans. Do you think that is possible?
Yes. I mean, I think the 1619 project is accepted by
Right.
more Americans than not. Now, is it accepted by more white Americans than not? I don't know. But I
Well,
think the
not just say not face that backlash then. Like to
oh,
be
and not face
to
backlash?
yes. Hey, because I was trying to think of an example
Yeah, I don't
of
think so. Not if it becomes widely known, right? So we know there's all types of amazing texts written by Black people, for Black people, about Black people that make very similar, as you know, 1619 Project is not radical, right?
right.
Like the ideas, the scholarship that it cites, this is not radical. Um, it is largely unknown outside of the academy, many of the arguments that we're making and many of the histories that we're telling. So I think those texts already exist and have existed, but it's something about, once they become really known to the mainstream, that's when they invite this type of attack. And no, I don't think you can have a project that tries to be very honest, that isn't trying to spare white people's feelings, that isn't, one of the critiques of my project was we didn't give enough credit to good white people, right?
Oh, I got that those questions too. Right?
Exactly.
Like
And I'm like,
a guy
first of
asked me in
all,
a book about Black history,
right. But also,
is there something about the white people who fought in the Civil War?
is there, right? And I'm like, well, one, that history. That's the whole point of why we're writing what we write, is we've heard that history. But frankly, it wasn't that many of y'all. Like, let's just be real. It wasn't most. I mean, this was, those group of historians got so upset when I said Black folks fought for their liberty mostly alone. Well, show me the evidence that at any time, even 25% of white folks were fighting on our side, right? 10%. So it's like, no, I'm not spending all my time writing a story that has already had outsized influence, where we think most white Americans were abolitionists and most supported the civil rights movement. It's just not true. But also we've told that story. So I think if you're not centering them, if you're really trying to critique this project and tell an honest, I mean, Michael, the honest rendering of American history is ugly as hell.
It's
It is ugly. It is ugly. Like, we might have these brief moments where America tries to do the right thing for marginalized people, but that is rare. And they want to focus on that. And if you're telling a more accurate version of that history, especially one that's focusing on those of us who have been on the bottom of the caste system, you're going to piss people off. You just are. It's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I don't know that you can have a truly honest text that doesn't do that. I mean, shit, half the books that are being banned, I'm like,
they ain't saying shit.
right. I'm like, really? I'm not gonna name nothing, but some of these texts, I'm like, you banning that? Okay. Then no,
Well,
we don't have a chance.
well, what's interesting about what you just said is this American mythology that we perpetuate and tell, right? But one of the things I always say is I have to admit, because being homeschooled, I didn't learn about that mythology. Like I started going to public school, and it's a damn good story, right? Like it is a really good. Like it's got heroes. I don't know, people riding horses, yelling the British are coming,
Right.
and right. But here's the crazy thing: what America is, like the ugly, violent truth of America, does not negate the what people think America can become, the beauty of America, the idea of democracy. Those two things are not kind of contradictory, right? And the most important thing to me is that America really does have the greatest story that's ever been told in the history of the world. What America, if you tell the truth about what this country did to Black people, there's nothing that has ever been done to people on the face of the earth that hasn't been done to Black people in America in mass, in bulk, like
Yes.
Sam's Costco versions of violence and massacres and murder. And to see where Black people are now, you don't even have to make up a crazy hero story. right? Because we got one, right? And the idea that you would not tell that story or that story would make you mad reinforces everything that you said in the 1619 project, right? Because, if you want to flatten it out to America just hates black people, the fact that you are mad at us telling that story, the greatest story that's ever been told, because the black people are the heroes in that story,
Exactly.
kind of proves the point that they're not even trying to make, or that you're saying we're making, right? And so the 1619 project, I think, one, and this is what the reason I want to have you on here is like a lot of black people in the past, have paved the way. We can say the words paved the way, but there is a new generation or a generation of black thinkers and truth tellers and journalists and historians whose way, at least, will know what to expect and will be prepared for what to expect when they tell the truth. And like introducing these ideas into the public lexicon is made easier simply by the existence of something that already kind of had all the deflective, the bullets fired at it, like they've emptied their barrel at 1619 project. So it's easy for me to be like, hey, I'm gonna write a book about Black AF history because they got a couple of bullets left, but it'll never be like, you know what I'm saying? And so, do you like when you think about and when you face all of the backlash that you face, do you feel like, oh yeah, at least I helped all of those people? Because I know, like, it's might seem narcissistic, but you have to, I think about like the road that you're paving when you do that. Do you ever consider that, like when you are facing all of that backlash?
Yeah, so one, just like you said, we know who paved the way for us to write as freely and in the ways that we can with major publishers, that sort of thing. That so many people um paved the way for that. I cite Lerone Bennett in the preface of the book because 1619 Project would not exist without Before the Mayflower, period. He is the one who introduced me to the White Lion and 1619 when I was 15 years old. And I remember reading his history lessons in Ebony magazine, right? Like he was writing history for a popular audience when I was a kid. So I would not exist without all of these writers. And I have thought, even when I pitched the project, which I was like, we're going to get as many Black writers in the New York Times Magazine as it's ever been in the New York Times Magazine. Like the story of slavery has to be told by the descendants of the enslaved. And I understood that if we failed, it would be harder for other Black folks to pitch something this ambitious at the Times or at other mainstream organizations because of the amount of resources that went into it. But if we succeeded, then those excuses that we've all heard that you can't do projects like this because they can't be commercially successful, because people don't want to read them. If we succeeded, we could disprove that and hopefully make it easier for other people to do big Black, unapologetically Black, unflinching projects. So I can't take credit for that, in that so many people contributed to making the project. I'm just the face of it. But I do think we helped create an atmosphere that allows more of this type of work because of how successful and successful being, books sold and all of that, but also successful in that how many educators want to teach it and how many politicians want to attack it, that shows you can have a big impact. So I think the last thing I think a lot about, I mean, obviously my personal shero, my adopted grandmother is Ida B. Wells, spiritual grandmother. And, we're just built for this. So I think when folks folks who think that they can attack us in the way that we get attacked, and I know you get attacked, I see it, that somehow we'll just crumble under the pressure. And it's like, dude, you have no idea, right? Because the things that built them didn't build us. And so what can take them out can't take us out, because we're not supposed to be in any of the spaces we're in anyway. And we come from folks who had no expectation that they would ever live the lives that we live. And I think about that all the time. And I'm just like, I can't believe that I get paid good money to read and write about Black folks. And that's just a tremendous blessing every day. And the folks who try to bring us down, they can't understand what we were built from. I mean, we've had conversations. My dad was born on a cotton field. My grandmother was a janitor with a fourth grade or third grade education. So we're just built of stronger stuff. And while the accolades are nice, that's not why we do what we do. And when we go into a room and our people are thankful to us for the work that we do, and they tell us what their work means to them, that's why we do what we do. And all their accolades, whatever it is, that's just a bonus. And I think the people who want to fight against us and discredit us, one, I think nothing makes them more angry than the fact that they can't write better than us and they can't make a better argument than us, because we actually do have facts on our side, right? So you attack, I'm like, I don't attack none of those folks who attack me, because I don't care. You're not relevant to my life or my work, right? I don't think what you do is that important. But the fact that they spend so much time on us, while we don't even think about them, kind of tells you everything you want to know, and it's kind of beautiful.
I couldn't have said it any better than that. I want to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for paving the way for Black AF history. Like, I do not think, I know that it would not have existed, and at least not have gotten the support that it did from the publishers to for them to put their resources behind it, if you had not done what you've done. So thank you for taking out your time today, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay.